to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. You are here exactly where you need to be, with nothing to solve and nothing to hurry toward. Let your shoulders soften, your jaw unclench, and the muscles around your eyes release as if they are melting into comfort. Inhale slowly, as though you could breathe in a warm blanket. And exhale as though you could sigh out the whole day. Outside, rain drifts down in patient sheets, tapping gently at the world. Inside, the air is calm and dim, and you can imagine a small, welcoming bakery glowing like a lantern in the wet evening, preparing a showcase of delicate pastries inspired by raindrops, mist, and moonlit puddles. Take another slow breath. Let it arrive without effort. Let it leave without effort. Feel the weight of your body supported, held, safe. If thoughts come wandering in, you do not need to chase them away. You can let them pass like clouds over a quiet hill, while you settle deeper into the hush. The rain continues its soft, rhythmic music. The sound asks nothing from you. It simply exists, steady and soothing, like a kind companion keeping watch. And as your breathing eases into a gentle tide, the story begins to unfold. Slowly, dreamily, like the opening of a curtain made of mist in a small town where cobblestone streets glisten with rain, there stood a bakery with windows bright as honey. The sign above the door read, Raindrop Bakery, painted in curling letters that looked as though they had been written with a brush dipped in cloud water. On evenings like this, when the sky was a deep velvet and every rooftop wore a shining cap of wetness, the bakery seemed to glow even more warmly, as if it were pleased with the weather and grateful for the rain's company. The town itself sat near a river that moved with quiet confidence. The river was not in a hurry. It traveled as rivers do, with endless patience, carrying reflections of lamplight and the occasional drifting leaf. Trees leaned over the water, their branches heavy with droplets that gathered and let go in their own time. The air smelled of damp stone, clean moss, and distant pine. Every sound felt softened by the rain, as though the world had wrapped itself in wool. On a night like this, the streets were mostly empty. Doors were closed, curtains drawn, kettles humming. Yet the bakery remained open because it was a special evening. The Raindrop Bakery Showcase, a gentle celebration of pastries made for rainy weather and quiet hearts. It was not a loud festival. There were no fireworks, no shouted announcements. It was more like a secret the town shared with itself, a soft tradition that arrived with the season's first long rains. Inside the bakery, warmth gathered in layers. It rose from the ovens and curled through the air with the scent of butter, vanilla, toasted sugar, and citrus peel. It hovered near the ceiling like a friendly spirit, then drifted down to settle on shoulders shoulders and hands and cheeks. The light came from hanging lamps shaped like small glass bells, each holding a flame that flickered gently as if it too were listening to the rain. Behind the counter, the baker moved with unhurried grace. Her name was Elowen, and she had the sort of calm presence that made people speak more softly without being asked. Her hair was pinned up in a loose knot, with strands escaping now and then, as if they wanted to wander. A dusting of flour rested on her sleeves like pale snow. She hummed as she worked, not a tune with sharp edges, but something round and soothing, like a lullaby remembered from childhood. Elowen did not rush. She never did. She believed that bread rose better when it was not watched too fiercely, and that sweetness tasted deeper when it was made with patience. On showcase nights, she treated every pastry as a tiny piece of weather, something formed from air and water and warmth. Placed each creation carefully, as if arranging constellations. The pastries were not merely beautiful, they seemed to carry a mood, a hush, a soft kind of magic that made the room feel gentler. The bell above the door gave a delicate ring, barely louder than a raindrop striking a leaf. A traveler stepped inside, shaking rain from a cloak. The traveler's name was Soren, and he had arrived in town just before dusk, guided by the river's silver curve and the promise of shelter. He had not planned to attend any showcase. He had simply followed the glow of the windows, drawn by warmth and a scent that felt like kindness. Soren paused just inside the doorway. He let the door ease shut behind him, careful not to let the cold air rush in too sharply. The bakery wrapped around him like a soft scarf. The warmth seeped into his hands, into the places between his fingers where chill liked to hide. His shoulders lowered without permission, as if they had been waiting for this very moment. A small table near the window held a vase of pale flowers, delicate blossoms that seemed to have been kissed into color by moonlight. Their petals were dotted with water, as if they had been gathered just after a gentle shower. A teapot sat nearby, sending up slow spirals of steam that rose and vanished, like sleepy thoughts dissolving. Elowen looked up and offered a smile that felt quiet and sincere. She did not ask hurried questions. She did not demand explanations. She simply welcomed him with a nod, as though she had expected him all along. "Come in," she said softly, her voice like warm milk. "The rain is making its evening song." Soren moved toward the counter, steps muffled by the old wooden floor. Around him, other visitors lingered in calm clusters, speaking in low tones. A woman with a knitted shawl traced the edge of a plate with her fingertip, admiring the pattern of icing. An older man watched the ovens through a small window in the kitchen door, as if the glow inside them reminded him of something precious. A pair of friends sat close together, cups held between their palms, their faces relaxed in the light. On the central table, the pastries waited like small dreams. There were cloud buns, round and pale, filled with a cream that tasted faintly of lavender and pear. There were rain-gloss tarts with berries arranged like tiny gemstones, their glaze shining as though each tart held its own little puddle of reflected sky. There were crescent rolls brushed with honey and sprinkled with crushed seeds that smelled of toasted earth. There were delicate cookies shaped like droplets, each dipped in a clear sugar shell that caught the light. At the center stood a cake that made Soren stop without meaning to. It was tall and softly layered, frosted in a gradient from pale gray to moonlit white. On its surface, tiny pearls of sugar had been placed with such care that they looked like beads of dew. The cake did not shout for attention, yet it held it, quietly and completely, like a moon in a calm sky. Elowen saw his gaze and inclined her head. "That one is called the night rain cake," she said. "It's made to taste like the moment after a storm, when the air turns clean and the world feels new." Soren leaned a little closer, breathing in. The scent was subtle. Vanilla, a whisper of almond, a cool hint of citrus. It reminded him of walking near water after rainfall, when the stones along the riverbed smelled sweet and ancient. On a lower stand sat a tray of small pastries shaped like lanterns. Their tops were glazed with something clear and shining, and their sides were dusted with powdered sugar that looked like fog. When Elowen lifted one to place it more neatly, it gave off a tiny shimmer, a brief glimmer like starlight slipping across glass. Soren blinked, unsure whether his eyes had imagined it, but the room felt full of that kind of possibility, the gentle sort that does not demand belief, only invites it. Elowen poured him a cup of tea without asking whether he wanted it, as though she could sense that he did. The tea smelled of chamomile and wet garden herbs, with a note of something bright, like lemon peel warmed by candlelight. She set it down in front of him. "Drink," she said, "and let your traveling thoughts settle." Soren wrapped his hands around the cup. The warmth seeped in slowly, like comfort remembering his name. He took a sip, and the tea unfurled across his tongue in soothing layers. The taste was not loud. It was the kind of flavor that made you breathe more slowly without noticing. As he drank, Elowen returned to the showcase table, adjusting a small sign written in careful script. Around each tray were notes describing the pastries in poetic phrases, words like mist soft, river bright, quiet thunder, moon sugar, puddle mirror. Reading them felt like listening to rain. A soft murmur moved through the bakery as more visitors arrived. The bell chimed gently each time the door opened, then quieted as the warmth reclaimed the space. Coats were hung, hoods lowered, umbrellas leaned neatly by the wall. Each person entered with a little of the wet night clinging to them, and each person softened as the bakery received them. Soren watched Elowen work. He noticed how she handled everything as if it were fragile and important, how she lifted a pastry with both hands, how she placed it as if it were a sleeping bird. He noticed the way she wiped the counter in slow circles as though smoothing the air itself. He He noticed that the rain outside seemed to become part of the bakery's rhythm, not separate from it. The showcase began in the gentlest way possible. Elowen did not make a speech. She simply rang a small bell made of porcelain, and its sound was so delicate that it felt like a raindrop landing in a cup of tea. People gathered near the central table, not crowding, just drifting into place. The lamps overhead glowed softly. The rain tapped on the windows, making tiny patterns in the glass. Elowen lifted a tray of droplet cookies and held it where everyone could see. "These are called Clearfall Drops," she said. "They're made with a sugar shell that cracks like thin ice, and inside there's a center of honey and rosemary." She offered one to the nearest visitor, a young man with a calm smile. He took it carefully, bit into it, and his eyes closed for a moment. He exhaled as if something inside him had loosened. A small, satisfied sound moved through the group. Soft laughter, gentle agreement. No one was in a hurry to speak. The pastries were doing the speaking in their own way. Elowen moved to the lantern pastries next. "These are glow crumb lanterns," she said. "They're filled with spiced custard and a little orange blossom. They're meant for nights when the rain makes the world feel far away." She broke one open with her hands, and the steam that rose from it was fragrant and warm. For a moment, the steam caught the lamplight and looked like a tiny ghost of sunshine. Soren felt his breathing deepen as he watched. The bakery was not merely feeding people, it was soothing them, gently guiding them toward a slower rhythm. Then Elowen reached for a tray covered with a cloth. She lifted the cloth with a quiet flourish, and underneath were small pastries shaped like smooth stones, each painted with a sheen that made them look wet. They were arranged in a spiral, as if following the curl of a river. "These are riverstone bites," she said. "Don't let them fool you. Inside they are soft as cake, with a center of dark chocolate and sea salt. They're meant to taste like finding a warm stone in a cold stream." A woman in a knitted shawl took one, her fingertips careful. She bit into it, and her face softened into an expression of deep contentment. She looked as though she had been given a memory she did not know she was missing. Soren realized something then. The showcase was not about impressing anyone. It was about creating tiny moments of peace, little edible pauses in the flow of the world. Elowen continued, moving from tray to tray. With each pastry, she described not only ingredients, but feelings. "This tart is for listening. This roll is for forgiving yourself. This bun is for resting your thoughts. This cake is for remembering that the rain is kind." Her words were soft, but they settled into the room like warm blankets. The visitors listened as though they were being told a bedtime story. When it was time to taste, Elowen invited everyone to choose whatever called to them. People moved slowly, plates in hand, selecting with gentle deliberation. There was no jostling, no urgency. Even desire was quiet here, softened by the rain and the glow. Soren found himself drawn back to the night rain cake. Elowen noticed and cut a slice for him. The knife moved cleanly through the layers. The cake inside was pale and tender, with thin ribbons of something darker. Perhaps blackberry, perhaps plum, perhaps the shadow of a storm cloud. She placed the slice on a plate and set it before him. "Eat slowly," she said, and her eyes held the kind of sincerity that made the instruction feel like permission rather than command. Soren took a small bite. The cake was soft and cool on his tongue, the frosting light and airy. The flavor opened gently like a door in a quiet house. Vanilla first, then a clean brightness like citrus, then a deeper note like dark fruit, warmed by rain. It tasted like a calm evening walk. It tasted like the hush after thunder. As he ate, Soren felt something inside him unwind, thread by thread. His traveling mind, usually busy with maps and distances, began to drift. The bakery's warmth held him. The rain's sound rocked him. Crescent moon! The parent brushed the crescent moon. The parent brushed the child's hair back with slow strokes, and the scene felt like a painting made of tenderness. Soren's gaze wandered to the shelves along the wall. Jars of preserves sat in neat rows: apricot and ginger, blackberry and sage, pear and vanilla bean. Each jar had a label written by hand, the letters slightly slanted, as if the person who wrote them had been smiling. There were tins of tea, bundles of dried herbs, small bags of sugar crystals that glittered like frost. A little wooden sign hung above the shelves, carved with a simple phrase, "Let the weather in gently." It felt like the bakery's philosophy made visible. Behind the counter, Elowen began preparing something special, something that seemed to be the heart of the showcase. She brought out a large bowl made of smooth ceramic, the color of river clay. She filled it with a clear liquid that caught the lamplight and shimmered faintly. The visitors leaned closer, curious but calm. Soren watched as Elowen lifted a spoon and let a thin stream fall back into the bowl. When it hit the surface, it made a sound, soft, musical, like a small bell underwater. The sound was so quiet that it could easily have been imagined, but it stirred the air with a gentle vibration. "This is rain syrup," Elowen said. "It's made from collected rainwater, filtered and sweetened, infused with herbs from the garden behind the bakery. It's used only for showcase nights." People murmured, not in skepticism, but in wonder. It was the kind of wonder that did not demand proof. It simply opened its hands and received. Elowen brought out small cups, clear glass, thin as petals. She poured a little of the rain syrup into each cup, then added something pale and soft. Tiny dumplings of cloud-like dough. She topped them with a sprinkle of crushed petals that looked like pale lavender. "These are mistfall cups," she said. "They're meant to be eaten while you listen to the rain." She offered a cup to Soren. When he took it, the glass was cool against his fingers, as if it held a piece of the night itself. He lifted a spoonful to his mouth. The taste was delicate and strange in the best way. Sweetness that felt like fog, a gentle floral note, a hint of herb that reminded him of crushed leaves after rainfall. It did not jolt his senses, it softened them. It made him feel as though His thoughts had slowed enough to be seen clearly, like fish gliding beneath calm water. As the visitors tasted, the room became even quieter. People moved with small, careful gestures. Smiles appeared and lingered, unforced. The rain outside sounded louder now, or perhaps everyone had simply begun to listen more deeply. Elowen stood near the showcase table and watched, hands folded loosely. Her face held the peaceful satisfaction of someone who had done what they were meant to do. She did not need applause. The softened room was her reward. Soren finished his cup and set it down gently. He realized he had stopped thinking about where he would sleep that night. He had stopped planning. He had stopped bracing himself. The bakery had given him a pause so complete that it felt like stepping out of time. A gentle movement near the door caught his attention. A small gray cat, damp from the rain, slipped inside as the door opened for a departing guest. The cat shook itself delicately, then padded across the floor with quiet confidence. No one shooed it away. The cat was clearly a familiar visitor. Elowen smiled and crouched to greet it. "Hello, Drizzle," she murmured, scratching behind its ears. The cat purred. A sound like distant thunder softened into comfort, and then it curled itself on a cushion near the oven, as if claiming the warmest spot in the room. The visitors continued to taste and talk softly. Some chose to sit at small tables, looking out at the rain-slick street. Others stood near the showcase table, reading the poetic signs as though they were lines of a gentle spell. Soren wandered toward the window and stood there, cup of tea still warm in his hands. Outside, the street lamps painted golden pools on the wet stones. The river beyond was hidden by darkness, but he could sense it, moving steadily, carrying the night along. He watched raindrops gather on the glass. Each drop formed slowly, swelling until it could no longer hold on, then sliding downward in a smooth, shining path. Some drops merged and became larger, moving with more certainty. Others traveled alone, leaving thin trails behind them like whispered stories. Soren's breath matched the drops, slow, easy, unhurried. Little lanterns of sound floating and little lanterns of sound floating and settling. The rain outside answered with its own rhythm, tapping on the roof, the windows, the world. The music did not demand attention. It simply offered itself, and the room accepted. Soren felt his eyelids grow heavy, but not in a way that alarmed him. It was a natural heaviness, the kind that comes when the body remembers it is allowed to rest. He turned from the window and looked around the bakery one more time. In the soft light, the pastries seemed almost unreal, like tiny weather sculptures made of sugar and flour. Yet they were real enough to taste, real enough to warm the hands and quiet the mind. Elowen moved quietly among the guests, refilling tea, offering napkins, speaking in soft tones. She seemed to glide rather than walk, her steps so gentle they barely made sound. The air around her felt calm, as if she carried a pocket of quiet wherever she went. Soren approached the counter again, drawn by a feeling he could not name. Elowen looked up. "You look as though the rain has found you," she said. Soren nodded slowly. "I think it has," he replied, and his voice sounded softer than he expected. Elowen reached beneath the counter and brought out a small paper box tied with twine. She placed it in front of him as though it were a gift, but her expression suggested it was simply the right thing to do. "For later," she said, "a little sweetness for the place where you sleep." Soren accepted the box with both hands. It was warm, as if it held a small piece of the oven's glow. He did not ask what was inside. He did not need to know yet. He thanked her, and the words felt sincere and slow. Elowen nodded, then glanced toward the door. "If you follow the street past the river bend," she said, "you'll find an inn with windows like sleepy eyes. They keep a fire going when the rain is steady. Tell them Elowen sent you, and they'll give you a room that smells of cedar." Soren felt gratitude spread through him like warmth in tea. He tucked the box beneath his cloak and prepared to leave. Yet he lingered, reluctant to step back into the wet night, not because the rain was unpleasant, but because the bakery's quiet had become a kind of sanctuary. Elowen seemed to understand. "Take your time," she said simply. So Soren took a final slow sip of his tea. He let the warmth slide down his throat. He let the calm settle deeper. He listened to the rain and the faint chimes and the soft murmurs of content visitors. He watched the cat near the oven stretch and resettle, curling into a tighter ball. When he finally moved to the door, the bell chimed softly. The sound was like a farewell, whispered rather than spoken. Outside, the rain welcomed him back with cool hands. The night air touched his cheeks, fresh and clean. The street lamps made the raindrops sparkle as they fell, turning the whole town into a place of glimmering threads. Soren walked slowly, cloak pulled close, the small box warm beneath it. His footsteps made quiet splashes on the cobblestones. The river's presence grew nearer as he followed the street's gentle curve. He passed sleeping houses with dim windows and flower boxes overflowing with wet petals. He passed a closed bookshop with a sign that swayed slightly in the wind. He passed a tiny square where a fountain trickled, its water mingling with the rain so that it seemed unsure whether it was falling or rising. The town felt like it was breathing in the rain, breathing out peace. As Soren approached the river bend, he paused on a small bridge. He rested his hands on the railing and looked down at the water. The river moved calmly, its surface broken by raindrops that formed countless tiny rings. Each ring expanded, met others, blended, disappeared. It was a gentle lesson in letting go. The lamps reflected in the water, stretching into long golden ribbons that trembled and steadied. Soren felt as though the river was carrying away any remaining sharpness from his day, any worry, any tightness, any leftover urgency. He stood there for a while listening. Rain on water, rain on stone, rain on leaves. A soft symphony with no beginning and no end. Eventually he continued, finding the inn Elowen had described. It sat just beyond the bridge, tucked beside a cluster of tall trees. Warm light seeped from its windows, and smoke curled from its chimney in a slow, sleepy ribbon. Inside, the inn smelled of cedar and wood smoke, with a faint hint of stew. that had been simmering for hours. The keeper greeted Soren with a kind nod and a voice that matched the town's softness. When Soren mentioned Aloan, the keeper's expression brightened. "Ah," the keeper murmured, "the rain baker. We're glad she's here." Soren was shown to a small room upstairs. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, gentle and contained. The bed was neatly made with thick blankets. The window overlooked the river, though the night hid most of it. Still, Soren could hear the water, steady and sure. He set the small paper box on the bedside table and loosened his cloak. He washed his hands in a basin of warm water, watching the droplets slide from his fingers. He changed into dry clothes that felt soft against his skin. Each movement was unhurried, like a ritual of settling. When he finally sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress gave beneath him with a welcoming sigh. He felt the day's remaining weight sink away. He opened the box Aloan had given him. Inside were pastries shaped like tiny raindrops, each one glazed so lightly it seemed to hold a sheen of moon. They sat nestled in parchment, delicate and inviting. Alongside them was a small folded note, written in Eloan's careful hand. It read, "Let your thoughts fall like rain. Let your heart become a warm window. Let sleep arrive gently." Soren smiled, the expression small and sleepy. He chose a raindrop pastry and took a bite. It was tender and soft, with a center that tasted of honey and something cool and fresh. Perhaps mint, perhaps lemon balm. The sweetness was gentle, not cloying. It tasted like comfort made edible. He ate slowly, then set the remaining pastries back in their box, saving them as though they were little pieces of peace he could return to. He placed the note on the table where he could see it, then climbed beneath the blankets. The fire's glow flickered on the walls, painting slow-moving shadows that felt like a lullaby in light. Outside, the rain continued to fall, steady and soothing. The river whispered its constant song. Soren lay on his back, hands resting easily at his sides. His breathing slowed. Inhale, exhale, like the rise and fall of the river, like the gathering and release of raindrops on a leaf. His mind drifted back to the bakery, the mist-colored linen, the glass bell lamps, the scent of vanilla and warm sugar, Eloan's calm voice describing pastries like small weather prayers. He imagined the cat curled near the oven, purring softly. He imagined the showcase table, each tray like a quiet landscape. The images did not excite him. They soothed him. They softened the edges of thought until there were no edges at all. The rain outside grew gentler, or perhaps it simply seemed gentler now that Soren was safe and warm. The sound became a steady hush, like hands brushing over fabric. The river's whisper blended with it, creating a layered calm. Soren's eyelids grew heavier. His thoughts became slower, more like feelings than words. The room's warmth held him. The blankets wrapped him. The night watched over him with quiet patience. In the bakery far across town, the lamps would still be glowing softly. The last guests would be leaving with boxes tied in twine. Eloan would be wiping the counter in slow circles. humming under her breath. Drizzle the cat would be stretching and padding after her, tail held like a question mark. The ovens would be cooling, their warmth lingering in the air like the memory of kindness. And the rain, faithful and gentle, would keep falling, blessing rooftops and rivers and sleeping windows. In Soren's room, the fire settled into a softer crackle. The shadows slowed. The world narrowed to breath and warmth and the sound of water in the night. His hands relaxed completely. His shoulders sank. His jaw softened. His tongue rested easily in his mouth. His forehead smoothed as though even his skin had decided to rest. The river whispered. The rain answered. Everything was calm. Everything was quiet. Sleep moved closer, not rushing, not demanding, arriving the way rain arrives, the way warmth spreads, the way a lullaby fades into silence. Soren's thoughts dissolved into softness. The bakery's glow became a distant, pleasant idea like a lantern seen through fog. The taste of honey faded into comfort. The sound of the rain became the whole world. Breath in, breath out. A quiet surrender, a gentle drifting, a peaceful sinking into rest. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.